Welcome back to Firepower. In December, something happened that most gun owners didn't see coming. There was no dramatic vote in Congress, no late-night signing ceremony, no sweeping federal ban announced on television, and yet, overnight, the legal ground beneath millions of gun owners shifted. Not because new laws were passed, but because a court decision changed how existing laws are interpreted, enforced, and challenged. That difference matters more than most people realize. Court rulings don't usually arrive with sirens or countdown clocks. They arrive quietly, through opinions, standards, and precedent. But once they land, they can reshape everything from how police interact with armed citizens to how permits are issued, how data is collected, and how far the government can go before it crosses a constitutional line. Today, we are breaking down what this December court decision actually changed, why the headlines are confusing, and what gun owners need to understand right now. This is not panic content. This is not legal advice. This is a clear-eyed look at how the rules of the game have shifted and where the risks and opportunities really are. Let's start by clearing up the biggest source of confusion. Despite what some thumbnails suggest, Congress did not pass 10 new gun laws. What changed was the legal framework that courts and agencies use to evaluate gun regulations. That distinction is critical. When a court changes the standard of review, it doesn't erase laws instantly. It changes how those laws survive challenges, how they are enforced, and how officials behave on the ground. Think of it like changing the rules of a trial, not the statute being tried. At the center of this shift is how the Second Amendment is treated in constitutional analysis. The December decision reinforced that restrictions on the right to keep and bear arms must face the highest level of scrutiny. This means the government now carries a heavier burden. It must show not only that a law serves an important interest, but that it is narrowly tailored and rooted in historical tradition. That alone changes the landscape. For years, many gun laws survived because courts deferred to lawmakers, accepting broad claims about public safety. Under this stricter standard, vague or overly broad restrictions are far more vulnerable. Agencies can no longer rely on general arguments. They must justify specific actions with concrete evidence and historical grounding. This shift also affects how law enforcement operates. One of the most talked about consequences of the ruling is how it limits qualified immunity in certain Second Amendment contexts. Qualified immunity has long protected officers from personal liability when enforcing laws that later turn out to be unconstitutional. The December decision narrows that shield when officers clearly violate established gun rights. What does that mean in practical terms? It means officers and departments are now more cautious when stopping, disarming, or detaining individuals who are lawfully armed. The risk calculus has changed. If a person is clearly exercising a protected right, and that right is infringed without proper cause, the legal exposure is no longer abstract. This does not mean police have lost all authority. It means the margin for error is smaller, and the incentive to respect lawful carry is stronger. Another major area affected is firearm confiscation without criminal charges. The ruling places serious constitutional pressure on red flag laws and other seizure mechanisms that bypass traditional due process. The core issue is not public safety, but procedure. Taken property, especially firearms, without a criminal charge, without a full hearing, and without timely judicial review is now far more vulnerable to challenge. Courts are signaling that due process cannot be treated as optional, even in emotionally charged situations. That doesn't automatically invalidate every red flag law, but it does mean enforcement agencies must tread carefully, follow stricter procedures, and be prepared to justify every step. Data collection is another front where the effects are being felt. The decision raises significant constitutional questions about firearm registries and federal data retention. While federal law already restricts the creation of a national gun registry, enforcement and record-keeping practices have lived in gray areas for years. The ruling reinforces that mass data collection on lawful gun owners, especially without clear statutory authority, is constitutionally suspect. This matters because data is power. Credit card codes, purchase records, and digital trails have become modern tools of regulation. The court's reasoning makes it much harder for the government to quietly build databases that track lawful gun ownership through indirect means. Now let's talk about permits, because this is where many people feel the impact first. The December decision strengthens the argument that permit systems cannot be used as delay mechanisms. Excessive wait times, vague good cause requirements, and inflated fees are increasingly difficult to justify. Courts are signaling that if a state chooses to require a permit, it must administer that system efficiently, affordably, and objectively. That doesn't mean permits disappear overnight. It means that permit systems designed to discourage ownership rather than regulate it face serious legal risk. Travel and carry rights are another area where expectations need to be realistic. Some headlines suggest that interstate carry is now universally protected. That interpretation goes too far. What the ruling reinforces is the principle that lawful possession during interstate travel is constitutionally protected when certain conditions are met. However, state-specific carry laws still matter, and misunderstandings here can create serious legal trouble. The key takeaway is not that you can ignore local law, but that blanket criminalization of lawful transport is increasingly difficult to defend. A quieter but equally important shift affects ammunition. For years, some states experimented with background checks for ammunition purchases, limits on quantities, or restrictions on online sales. The court's reasoning casts doubt on these measures, especially when they function as indirect barriers to exercising a constitutional right. If ammunition is essential to the use of a firearm, restrictions on ammo face the same constitutional scrutiny. That doesn't mean all ammo regulations vanish. It means they are no longer insulated from serious challenge. The ruling also impacts firearm businesses. Federal firearms license holders have long complained about aggressive enforcement over paperwork errors rather than criminal conduct. The decision reinforces the idea that administrative penalties must be proportional and tied to actual wrongdoing. Revoking licenses over minor clerical mistakes without evidence of intent or harm is increasingly difficult to defend. This doesn't remove oversight, it rebalances it. One of the most controversial aspects of the ruling involves privacy and surveillance. The court's language strongly reinforces Fourth Amendment protections when applied to gun owners. Digital surveillance, purchase tracking, and data mining without warrants face heightened scrutiny. The message is clear. Constitutional rights do not shrink simply because technology makes surveillance easier. This matters because modern regulation often operates quietly through data rather than force. By limiting those tools, the court has changed the enforcement environment in subtle but meaningful ways. Now let's address the most important question. What did not change? This ruling did not repeal state gun laws. It did not create nationwide permitless carry. It did not invalidate every regulation on the books. States still have authority. Laws will still be enforced. Appeals will continue. And outcomes will vary by jurisdiction. This is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new phase. Some states will resist. Others will adjust. Some laws will fall. Others will survive with modifications. And in the meantime, confusion will be the most dangerous thing for gun owners. Which brings us to what matters most. How should gun owners respond? First, slow down. Do not assume that viral headlines accurately describe your legal situation. Overconfidence can be just as dangerous as ignorance. Second, pay attention to your state and local guidance. Court rulings shape interpretation, but enforcement happens locally. What changes in one circuit may take time to affect another. Third, understand both your rights and your responsibilities. Knowing what you are allowed to do is only half the equation. Knowing what is still restricted is equally important. Fourth, avoid acting on assumptions. If you are unsure about carry, transport, or compliance, verify through reliable sources. Mistakes made during periods of legal transition are often the most costly. The larger lesson here is about how rights actually evolve. Constitutional rights are not static. They are shaped by courts, tested by enforcement, and clarified through conflict. The December decision did not magically simplify gun law. It made it more contested, more dynamic, and more dependent on informed citizens. For gun owners, that means awareness matters more than ever. Not fear, not celebration. Awareness. The law didn't suddenly become friendly or hostile. It became fluid. And in a fluid legal environment, the people who do best are the ones who stay informed, stay calm, and stay grounded in reality. Now, we want to hear from you. Which part of this ruling surprised you the most? Do you think it strengthens rights, creates confusion, or both? And are you seeing changes in how laws are enforced where you live? Drop your thoughts in the comments. These conversations help everyone navigate a complex and changing legal landscape. If you want more clear, measured breakdowns like this, without panic and without spin, make sure you're subscribed to Firepower. We focus on understanding what's actually happening, not just reacting to headlines. Stay informed, stay responsible, and we'll see you in the next one.